Ladies and gentlemen, this is a phenomenal piece of video.
They speak liberal, they have liberal friends, and then they go online and they are a white supremacist. They're the most insecure men I've ever sat down with. It was really difficult to have some of these dates because they were so insecure, because they don't really know who they are and they don't know how to figure that out.
She said the men she dated got all their news and information from the so-called manosphere.
They did not listen to anything else. They're only listening to independent media, and they're only listening to men talking to men. They love the UFC guys. They love the MMA guys because those guys do what they can. They're modern gladiators. They're badass. One of these guys brought me to a political meeting.
And did they talk about politics?
Barely. They talked about, it was a bunch of men complaining about girlfriends and wives, regurgitating Andrew Tate type of advice about how to train your girlfriend, how to train your wife to be submissive. And so this group was supposed to be a political group, but they're talking about relationship problems. And the fact that that's what most of the time was spent on, you don't need to be a neo-Nazi. You need therapy. The thing about these guys is their biggest support system is online, but that also is very isolating, and isolation is what breeds hatred.
Groups like Patriot Front offer community, but community based on racism and hate.
People have to really think about, do you have the capacity to talk to people that you don't agree with? Because that one nice conversation you might have might change someone's day enough to not have to seek out help in an online support group, which is actually a bunch of white supremacists using political beliefs as an excuse for how they feel.
That's Vera Papasova, an independent journalist who decided to go undercover and tell all about dating men in the manosphere. We have discussed this before, and if you missed it,
there is a massive amount of right-wing radicalization that has been occurring, especially in younger male spaces. Everything is completely dominated by right-wing politics. If you're a dude under the age of 30 and you have any hobbies whatsoever, whether it's playing video games, whether it's working out, whether it's, I don't know, listening to like a history podcast or whatever, every single facet of that is just completely dominated by center-right to, I wouldn't say far-right in the same way that it was back in like the 2016 era at the end of like Obama's administration, but like definitely center-right to Trumpian right, like openly Trump right, not like genuinely neo-Nazi. That part is quieted down a little bit, but like they're like 90% of the way there for the most part. And that's it. Everything that they see is right-wing sentiment being expressed by individuals that they find charismatic, thought leaders, influencers that they subscribe to. And I think that that is some of the reason why you see this movement.
A member of the manosphere akin to a Jordan Peterson, Joe Rogan, Bradley Martin, Andrew Schultz, Nelk Boys, etc. is former UFC fighter Jake Shields. Now, I am going to give you some names that he has hosted, okay? Former Grand Wizard of the Triple K, David Duke. Ian Carroll, a man who was on Rogan pretty recently, within the last month or two, who espouses and clings to Nazi rhetoric. Bryce Mitchell, a UFC fighter who has praised Hitler. The leader of Patriot Front, Thomas Russo, known anti-vaxxer and January 6th rioter, Tony Moon. Myron Gaines, a man who said he would date teenagers, will not date black women, and wrote a book titled Why Women Deserve Less. He's also with the Fresh and Fit podcast. They're horrible. The leader of the Proud Boys, Enrique Tarrio. Do you get a theme going on here a little bit? And then Royce White, who unsuccessfully ran for the Senate in Minnesota. So Shields was interviewed by CNN's Donny O'Sullivan, and he made the argument that these conversations are helpful.
Which is precisely the reason why I do not ever want to extend a lending hand, even if I am being critical. Even if I am being critical of them, I feel like having a conversation with someone like that ends up giving them a lot more, even if they get their arguments get thoroughly dismantled, right? Like this person, you did debate Nick, though. Exactly. It was, I think, one of the worst moments of my career in general was that he snuck into that conversation, and it was a terrible idea. It's something that I have deep shame for. I think it was horrible. It doesn't matter if you dunk on Nick Fuentes, you're still giving him a platform that he never ever would have gotten. Why are you so cruel towards broken men? I'm not. A broken man has the opportunity to fix himself and become a better person. I'm cruel to those who make it everybody else's problem. I'm cruel to broken men who, in their broken male status, turn around and attack everybody viciously. Only weak men, only insecure and weak men actively put the crosshairs on those who are vulnerable.
Yet hear from one man who detached from it altogether.
They adopted bro culture. Yeah. The things I was into 10 years ago, the same people I used to follow online. Yeah. I used to be a big Joe Rogan fan. Who else is there? Bradley Martin. And they adopted bro culture. People who don't even know they're taking in right-wing ideology.
Well, I have had to talk to a lot of people who don't know, and they say that's where they get their information from. And Donald Trump has actually been able to activate and energize that demographic in the electorate, which could put him over the top. And so you don't listen to them anymore.
There was a couple of Joe Rogan interviews that threw me off a little bit a couple of years ago. And then you looked up the names and who these people are, and you're like, well, this guy's an obvious white supremacist or a race scientist. And you're like, how did we get here? It's so confusing.
In the end,
you can usually, those groups are always going to exist, right? But in times of abundance, no, not really. In times of better economic and baseline economic conditions, and when baseline needs are met, when there's more upward mobility, when there's hope about the future, you're less likely to have these reactionary groups gain in prominence because there is a sense of purpose that is found outside of insular and often hateful communities. And part of what, honestly, I think I missed in the lead up to this election was these insular communities that I don't understand, of the manosphere or these online far-right influencer spaces, because they are definitionally insular. And it creates antisocial behavior, but it also gives people at least some sort of temporary release to the alienation that people are feeling, exacerbated during COVID, but really exacerbated as income and wealth inequality continues to worsen. And we've had multiple recessions, we've had multiple economic crises. And what is the result of that? What was the result of the Great Recession in 2008? More transfer of wealth to the top.
If you can and are willing, please become a paid member here at TYT Sports. And or go to tyt.com/join. In addition, you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Appreciate it. Have a great day.